People are texting me. They're trying to find, how do they find your live video?
Oh, it's just because it hasn't started yet. So
Okay.
as soon as we go live, which is right now, it'll pop up on my YouTube channel on my
People are
link.
texting me. They're trying to find, how do they find your live video?
Oops, I got it. Oh, it's just because it hasn't started yet.
Okay.
So as soon as it's mute, we got to mute that. Okay. So yeah, they should be able to find us now. And I'm able to look at the chat right now in case anybody wants to send us any questions or comments or come along the ride with us. So welcome to Goddess Vibrations, the spiritual sexual empowerment show. I'm super excited to have Kirti back. She's been on a bit of a hiatus. She was attending our friend Kiyoshi's Expand Your Expression course, which is relates to opening up the throat chakra, rapping, creating music. And I've had Kiyoshi on in the past of my YouTube channel as well. So you can go back and see that video, which is an excellent conversation, not such good video quality because that's when we were first getting started. But here we are now. Hey, Jen. Jen says hello.
Aww.
Thank you for joining. Thanks for letting us know that you're there. So tonight, our topic is healing vibrations, the vagina, vagus nerve, and vocal cords, and the relationship between those. And this was inspired by Kirti. She does a movement medicine in the park, lets goddesses get their feet on the earth and dancing and moving through emotion. It's a really powerful practice. And she had mentioned this connection between the vagina, the vagus nerve, and the vocal cords. So I thought, why don't we talk about that on the show, which we're already planning on doing this week. So, I mean, where do we start? I think probably the most obvious place to start is the anatomy piece, right? I mean, the throat and the vagina are very similar anatomy.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times when, I first work with women on building their creative expression, or if they come and say that they want to be more sensual for their lovers, that's a big one. Why people come out right to play is that they're like, I want my intimacy to be more expansive. A lot of times what I'll do is I will show them a picture, of the vocal cords. And a lot of times what they what they think is they're like, oh, okay, so like, wow, I've never seen the uterus like this. And it's like, well, interestingly enough, these are the vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a picture of your vocal cords, those of us walking around with vaginas, you will see that, it looks very much, your vagina and your vocal cord looks very, very similar. And a lot of times the way we express sensually and sexually is very linked and connected to how we express our voice. And so, the throat chakra of Visuddha, and you could even say the first chakra and second chakra of Muladhara and Svadhisthana are very closely linked. And what's beautiful is that the bridge between the two, just moving to spiritual anatomy for a moment, the bridge between the two is the heart. So the heart is really the ultimate gateway to understanding the connection between the two. But yes, so let's talk about that. The vagina and vocal cords look the same. And then also, let's talk about the vagus nerve real quick anatomically, right?
Yeah, let's
So,
talk about what that is, because I think a lot of people don't know what the vagus nerve
yeah, okay, I'm so excited about that because
is.
there's just part of me that just loves, it's probably like the educator in me. Like I love neuroscience and working with kids, you just see how those light bulbs go off and you immediately want to understand like how our body comes together. But the vagus nerve is this beautiful nerve that actually really does have two parts, and it extends from the brain and it passes down along the spinal column and somewhere ends near the colon. It kind of like, is it's its final landing place. Um, and the vagus nerve, it's not inside of the spine, but runs along the spine. And also, the vagus nerve taps into literally all of our organs, as well as taps into our, if it taps into our organs, it's tapping into our emotions, clearly, right? Because we know from practices like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, that it's all linked, our emotional well-being compared to the overall health of our organs. And it's closely, if that's the case, then you know that it's also closely linked to the nervous system, right? Because the way our organs are managed are all about our nervous system and how we manage our emotions. So the vagus nerve literally taps into even our facial structures, our inner ear. And so there's lots of close connections with when you tap into the power of the vagus nerve, building your receptivity, not only physically, but when we build our physical receptivity, we build our emotional receptivity, we build our senses, our overall presence. So the vagus nerve is a really, really big part of it. And it's so intriguing to me because the vagus nerve also, it's closely linked in to since the colon, right, it's its resting place. You can imagine how much of the vagus nerve and the nerves are linked in with our stomach. And we know what we think of as the stomach and the gut, right? It's the second brain.
Mhm.
So it's a really beautiful connection. And then in the spiritual sense, the gut is actually Manipura, the third chakra. And the third chakra is, the more you do the chakra work, we haven't really like gone here when as in the other sessions, but the third chakra is where our psychic abilities rest because it is the second brain.
Mm.
Right. And so when we want to tune in to our highest beings and beams and expressions of ourselves, that's why we do things like fasting. Right. That's why we do things like different cleanses and different practices from around the world really focus on that digestive tract and the lining in terms of its ability to cleanse and detox and purify so that we can be clear channels to receive optimal, fullest healing from the physical sources and the elemental forces.
That absolutely makes sense with how, as to why nutrition would be so good for trauma healing too, because that's what I've noticed in my work is that, and Dr. Mark Hyman says this too, if, without stress management, you can't change nutrition. Without nutrition, you can't change stress. And the vagus nerve being that mediator of stress in the body, being, part of the autonomic nervous system, I never really thought about it as it related to the chakras. So that's really, really interesting. It just takes a new layer there. And then obviously so many women have experienced trauma in the vagina, in the vaginal area, and that's holding probably a lot of armoring. And then so you have this, imagine like this current, of fight or flight constantly linking through brain, gut, throat, heart, and vagina, like this, all these areas. And even something as simple as breath work, what I learned in my PhD program is that the breath actually, these deep belly breaths tone the vagus nerve, and
Wow.
and then we get good vagal nerve tone, and we have good vagal nerve tone, it's like toning your stress system, and you are more resilient, less um, less able to be swayed by events that are coming. So it's like all of these things are so intertwined, and we're still learning more and more about this.
Yes, and I love that it's called toning, right? Because
Mhm.
it helps really remind us of the connection to the vocal cords too. The tone, right?
Say, tell you too, Kirti, Nikita and Rich are on too. And
Oh, yay.
so thanks for supporting, guys. Thanks for
Oh,
being here.
that's amazing.
Mhm. So what were you saying
Oh yeah,
before?
I was saying that, yeah, I think I love that it's called, vagal toning.
Mm,
And we just know like different tones, notes, and look at the word note and tone, your tone of voice.
mm,
What I'm saying is like tune, tone, notes. These are there's a reason why they're so closely linked. I truly believe, and we can use that to remind ourselves. Use the words to help remind ourselves. Like the tone of voice we use actually affects your vagal toning, right? The tone of the way in which you interact with your emotions,
mhm,
the tone of voice you use with yourself,
mhm.
it affects the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is this gorgeous, long stretch of feel. And
Mhm.
it's an amazing thing, some people don't know this about my story, but one thing I had to navigate in my teens, at 16, I had gotten into a surfing accident, and I got hit with a nose rider, a friend's nose rider, right at my C5, and my brain stem is still a little bit, between C1 and C5. There's lots of interesting healing that's taking place and regenerative that's really pretty phenomenal. One thing for me at that age, I was really in love. I had an amazing lover. It was a very, very tantric relationship. We didn't engage sexually with our genitals the whole relationship, which was between 3 and 4 years. And it was when I was getting into the Tao of sexology, and I got to just practice so many amazing things with this partner. And when I got into this accident, my neck had kind of spasmed. So the nerves, my spinal column from, my hip, my legs weren't moving. And there was this, chance that I may not walk again. And it was, it was pretty intense for my, I mean, I'm sure for my family. And I know for me, I was already a dancer for, 10 years at that point. So um, that idea of not being able to use my legs, it wasn't my reality. I knew internally, I was very clear, like, that's not true. I will be walking. Like, this something else is going on here. I had no doubt in my mind. But what was interesting was I had amazing orgasms. That's the whole point of the story. And I had amazing orgasms because that's the beauty of the vagus nerve. It's not in the spinal column. So it's got this direct line of energy that's not affected by spinal injury or trauma. And if anything, if the other parts of you that are kind of like turned down for a reason, like for my injury, the connection between my legs and my brain wasn't super strong. But what I noticed was this gift of when some senses are subdued, other senses are heightened.
Mm.
And when you're a dancer and a surfer and kind of an athlete, I did try to play basketball in high school. Don't even, it's the shortest point guard, but I did try. But I consider myself athletic. It was very hard to be confined to like a mattress, you know what I'm saying? And wanting to move your body, and also being a lover and a friend, and just wanting to have a social high school life and experience. And then all of a sudden it was like done, and that wasn't a space for me anymore. And it was also kind of this reality that it could never be a space for me again. However, what I did notice was I had heightened sensitivity in other areas, and that, I think, actually got me more intrigued with understanding how the body is totally connected. And I just started to explore that. In high school, you're not really in the world that we're in now, but if you're desperate enough to walk again, you know, you'll try anything.
Mhm.
And definitely had lots of moments of personal sensuality and personal pleasure during that time of my life, and I'm really I mean, it's just like another blessing of that experience. So I got to experience that. And later on, recently, when, some of my spinal stuff started coming back up again, I started to like dig a little bit deeper into the deeper meanings of everything. I was like, oh, whoa, this makes so much sense. So I just came up with all of these connections and realities, probably within the last 5 to 7 years of just unwinding and, having the awakening, and being more present. So that's the beauty of the vagus nerve too, is it 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 is a big part of orgasm too, because believe it or not, the nervous system is heightened when you're about to have your orgasm, because it's like, what, here we go, and it's like the pelvis is beginning to tighten, right? And in the ultimate sense of release, when we talk about the depth of orgasm, the vagus nerve is a big part of that. And so that's why we get an even bigger release in orgasm when we use sound, because the biggest activator of the vagus nerve is vibration. And so when we say, or oh, it's like you're sending a whole vibration down
Mhm.
your vagus nerve, which then allows your nervous system to relax and your orgasm can fully take place. But that orgasm, again, when we take that science and we align it with the spiritual anatomy, what we understand it is the Sushumna channel. The
Mhm.
vagus nerve has the Sushumna channel in a Kundalini awakening within the beautiful duet of the Ida and Pingala, right? And the Sushumna is oftentimes compared to the vagus nerve for that reason. So it's all entwined. And orgasm is often defined as the release of tension, and that's really what the vagus nerve is responsible for.
I have so many questions now. So many observations coming up. The first one is just hearing your story. Thank you for sharing. It's just awe-inspiring to be reminded that our post-traumatic growth, of that we can go through these traumas, and we actually sometimes it leads us to some of our best,
Mm.
um, highest calling. I mean, you were 16, you said 16 when it happened?
Mm.
16 when it happened, and you're having these massive orgasms because of this neurological issue, and then look at you now. You're you're working with sexuality and helping women liberate themselves and all of this, and it's like it's hard to be mad at that trauma or that injury, right? Even though it still has some lingering effects. And I've noticed that in my own life too. Some of the deepest, darkest wounds are actually are the very things that led me to the greatest openings. And when we think about it that way, that perspective shift, it's really hard to be stuck. It's really hard to be stuck. It's like, bring it on. Like, what's next? How are we going to move through this? Because you get to see the other side. So that's the first thing. And then also we got a few other people. Steffi's on, bringing the fire.
Mm.
Space we create, sending some hearts. Thank you, everyone.
Mm.
But yeah, also, the sounds. And I remember giving birth at home with my son, and the midwife and the doula are telling me, oh, like, this low humming to open up and relax the cervix and relax the vagina to actually birth the baby. And so, there's so many times, whether it's porn, and I know you and I have talked about this before, the high pitched like panting, or in the movies when you see birth happening, it's not very conducive. What you see in the media is not very conducive to actually facilitating a real life process in the healthier sense. And yeah, the vibrations of even just letting loose that sound when you're in that sexual interaction, because I know in working with sexual trauma victims the last 20 years, a big trigger for them in their sexual healing. And by the way, like, the first parts of healing, as you know, are dealing with yourself and figuring out how to calm down the nervous system. But then the next phase is to get back in partnership and start working on that with a partner, right? And get back into those healing sexual spaces. And for a lot of people that have experienced sexual abuse, silence during sex is a huge trigger. It brings them into that feeling of like the abuse that was in secrecy, that they had to be quiet, or that happened in the wee hours of the night, or in a closet somewhere, or whatever else. So I feel like sounding is really healing in those moments. And then there's a cultural piece that you and I have talked about too, where women aren't supposed to be taking up space, or aren't supposed to be heard, or we're too much, or whatever else. So you add that to the mix. So we've got trauma, cultural stuff, all of this, movies, media, and we got to break that. And even the stuff that you're doing at the park with letting women express, move their body, create sound is so liberating, but it takes practice. It takes practice to get to that point where it feels comfortable. And you can't have anybody push you to do it. And I think you do a very good job of inviting
Yeah.
folks to do that, because that's that, that trauma informed
Yeah.
care.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, if you even, so much of the work and the work of Tantra is, we learn, we embrace the emotions, and the body is the instrument from which we listen to the harmonies. The body if we listen, if we listen closely enough, the body will tell us everything,
Mm-hmm.
and our bodies are a reflection of earth, because we've talked about this, that our grandmothers ate from the earth, and as they received the DNA of our mothers and in their uterus, our DNA was arriving. We are of that. So when we want to think about birthing and we look to earth and this planet, I just don't hear high pitched sounds. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually guttural, and the sound om kara om, is a representation of that guttural birthing
Mm-hmm.
that occurs in all birth of all matter that comes together. It's this guttural sound. I mean, animals make it, volcanoes do it, geysers. I mean, it's a bellow. You got to find the strength and energy from a really deep place
Mm-hmm.
to be willing to birth. And what makes it so guttural is that your commitment to the birth is also the grieving of releasing and letting go. I mean, the mother releases the child into the world
Mm-hmm.
that you have nurtured and held in protection and safety,
Mm-hmm.
and with an immediate connection of the umbilical cord. I mean, baby is just like fully taken care of, and the mother is releasing. The birth is a release.
Mm-hmm.
It's guttural.
Yeah,
So,
that's a thing. I know I was in active labor for a very long time with my son, and they thought that I wasn't emotionally willing to release, which sounds a lot like me, but in that circumstance, it wasn't the case. He actually had his like hand up like this, so he kept getting stuck. He would drop down, then go back up. He'd drop down, go back up. But really, I never had the sensation to push, but then I had to like create the sensation to push, and I did it. I thought I was gonna have this really peaceful water birth, right? But it didn't happen because every time I got in the water, I got relaxed and then nothing happened. And so it was very primal. I was on all fours on the bed, just like that, the same. You said the guttural, it was loud. It was like a warrior cry. It was, getting the baby out. And yeah, so that's a thing. But, that experience was so transformative for me because I don't think that I realized the power of my body until that time. And, the way that I almost feel like that's stolen from women so often now in the way that we tell them to birth, or we tell them, there's so many things that are stolen from women that disconnect us from the earth, from our natural rhythms, for the ways of being. And what more can we do to, I mean, I'm not saying birth is not for every woman.
right.
Sometimes not having a child is freedom, and allows her to create her divine purpose. But what are ways that women can, get back in touch with that divine intelligence? um
Right. Yeah. And also, we have beings walking the planet who don't have, necessarily aren't walking around with vaginas. Doesn't mean that their vagus nerve is not as connected. It's just that with the way the female anatomy is, and I think that it's created that way on purpose. That we the way I'm really starting to understand that the neck and the yoni are birthing spaces. They're birthing canals, literally. And cervix translates to neck. I mean, it's like, what else do we need, y'all? Like Vegas translates to wandering. I mean,
Mm,
what else do we need to show that, like, our ancestors and the way we were the unique design in which we arrive on this planet? I mean, spirituality is science and science is spirituality, and the farther we get away from that, we think that we are separate. So yeah, that's a really good question. The concept of the womb has really been hijacked by probably a lot of women feeling like we've been disrespected, and it's almost kind of like reclaiming the n-word for our Black brothers and sisters. Sometimes I feel like the womb has become this thing to only represent either mothers, women who have mothered, or are pregnant, or it has come to represent women who have uterus space, um, and womb. The way that womb might mean that in English, but the term yoni, it's the whole piece of it. It's the Shakti. Okay. It's the Shakti of the Kundalini. So, with the question of like those of us who haven't had child, because yes, I have to say every single woman I've talked to, it doesn't matter what kind of labor, how she delivered the baby, but she has that download of and upload, download, upload, simultaneous bliss zone, and gets very clear on alignment, divinity, design, what the child needs. Like you just get special mama powers, which comes through birth, comes through that labor. So for those who don't go through the mothering process in terms of delivering a baby, the yoni space is a space of Shakti. The womb space is a space of Shakti. And Shakti is the divine feminine energy that is within all of us. And that divine feminine energy is what creates flow. And flow is what creates birth. Because flow comes from creativity. Okay. And orgasm is flow. Orgasm is flow. Orgasm comes from vibration, right? Orgasm is a release of tension. Orgasm comes from creative lovemaking. Orgasm comes from creative expression. None of those have to do with popping a baby out of your coochie. None of those. All of those have to do with creation, more creation of versions of ourselves on this planet. And there are lots of different ways to think of birth. And I think the more that men and women and all of those who identify in the in-between spaces of that binary duality, the more that we see that we are just walking expressions of the integration of the divine masculine and feminine energies within all of us, we can start to understand and tune into the tone of the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve, it does its things when we are in tune with our alignment, just like the Ida and Pingala does its thing with the Sushumna channel. So all we're doing is the more that we work on understanding ourselves and being our truths and truest expressions of ourselves, and we take the time to develop the communication skills to literally transmute and literally transform those breakdowns you were talking about, those traumas, and see that, oh, fuck, I'm so excited because this trauma's gonna be a treasure, gonna be a treasure. I'm gonna be excited. Come on, trauma. Oh, yeah, trigger. Let's do the trigger. Yeah. Once it starts to become that, because you're like, oh, shit, this breakthrough's gonna be big. I feel like shit. Oh, I can't wait to compost this. I can't wait to fertilize my soil with this manure. Yeah. When we get to that space, then birthing is just like every moment. Exhale, birth, exhale, rebirth, inhale, birth, exhale, rebirth. And it's just your vagus nerve. And then you add sound like oming and chanting and humming and singing and rapping and talking, speaking your truth through your throat chakra. None of that has to do with, birthing a baby.
Well, and I can just use myself as an example. I have 2 children. I was married. I was not having, I could probably count on one hand how many orgasms I was having during that time. And I also was not speaking my truth because I had several people around me that were interested in controlling me, and I was letting them. A boss, family members, a husband, all of these things. And it was so subtle that I didn't even, at times, that I didn't even, I wasn't fully aware of like, I feel awful. but I don't know where it's coming from. And then I realize it's everybody, it's all of them. And so, unsubscribing to those relationships and taking my power back. I know it's a cliche term, but it was really about setting those boundaries and saying, no, just because you're this doesn't mean you get to be here or whatnot. And so as I started to do that, folks get angry, right? They get angry because when you stop playing the role that you're used to playing, and that is also determined by your family system and your family of origin, and you inherit that position, and you do the work or you don't. Even if you're the black sheep, I'm still the black sheep, and I still manage to fall into these certain, caretaking roles, or these roles that weren't always serving me. And going through that process, my sexuality was very much repressed during my marriage, and that combined with the trauma of the escalation of violence, really more so emotional and manipulation than anything, did cause a kundalini pop. And then some other energy work that I was doing. So it was like all these multiple things. Of course, I'm doing my dissertation on this experience right now, so I don't even know the answers yet. I'm just in that process of discovering. So it's really interesting to talk to you, to have that, the knowledge of some of the ancient teachings on these processes. And the reason why I say kundalini pop and kundalini awakening is because I didn't know what the hell was happening to me, but every spiritual person that I explained it to, like channel or mentors, like, oh, that's a kundalini awakening. I'm like, whoa, okay, what is that? I just know that I was super like dysregulated. But also, again, like, it reminds me of your accident, because you said you weren't getting, your legs weren't quite working, but you're having these amazing orgasms. And here I'm like at a phase where I was so sexually repressed, I wasn't able to speak my truth. I'm feeling restricted here, feeling restricted here. All of a sudden, it's like, can't do it anymore. Boom. And then I'm having, multiple orgasms daily, and it's nothing that I consciously did, to my knowledge. It's sort of this energy flowing through me. And so this is where I become really interested in the energetics of these things. And again, I'm still trying to figure it all out. I don't have all the answers. But I do know that that was a very powerful time in my life. And it wasn't about sex. I did not have a partner. I did not take any lovers. I was simply harnessing and exploring that energy myself. And I noticed that I became magnetic. That's when my business started. There's no reason that my business should have been successful based on all of the things going on at the time and how it was spread thin I was, but it was just like miracles were coming in and all of this stuff. And I'm like, is this real life? Like, what's happening right now? And yet it was very dysregulating too. And so, I don't, and people say, oh, how can I create that experience? And I'm thinking, like, I wouldn't do it the way that I did it, because I didn't get my taxes done for 3 years. It was very dysregulating. But it's also a bliss state. It's very blissful. So how do we keep all of that in balance? And even with the traumas, like, it's like you have this post-traumatic growth, but on the other hand, you don't want to be charging into the middle of a battlefield and be like, yay, trauma. Like, it's going to be great. Because I don't want to discount.
Forward march.
Yeah, I don't want to discount for folks out there that are, it's really suffering with PTSD and these sorts of things, because I know I've been there. I've been in bed, can't get out of bed, before I knew the ways out, before I knew the tools. And here you and I are talking about, like, oh, it's blissful. We have all these great experiences from our trauma. And I want folks to know that are watching this, that we've done a lot of work. Like, it's not that it's been all sunshine and roses, it's about continuing to meet it and find the ways to move through, and to keep using those tools, and to keep using those skills, and to keep returning to the issue, to get to that sweet spot. So, and then that's what, my group is that I'm doing next week.
Right.
Starting my 10-week mind body skills group is really spending time in a small intimate group to teach some of those skills that help you regulate the autonomic nervous system, that tone the vagus nerve, that help teach communication, so that you can move through those traumas. And now I'm all blurry because I get all excited about moving and my webcam can't keep up. It'll come back.
It's going to catch up.
Yeah, it'll catch up.
Yeah, I think that you bring up like so that was also really wonderful to listen to because yeah, so many connections being made, but a really big one is this pain and pleasure connection,
Mhm,
right? And we've been talking about that a lot. Pain and pleasure, it's just all about perspective.
mhm.
It doesn't it's about where you're sitting and how you're experiencing what's going on, and that's a practice. We are raised in a Western culture, myself as well. It's like we tend to um be really wary of dealing with pain, and we just want to like cut it off and numb it immediately instead of processing the pain. And so a lot of times, what we might oftentimes diagnose as, serious PTSD or serious trauma, it's also like a perspective shift. It's because a lot of what we're doing to our human brothers and sisters is we're not allowing the space and time to process
Mhm.
the protocols, and this what the system is based on a very synthetic a very synthetic, quick fix, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, get fucked attitude.
Yeah.
It's not a love making affair that is rooted in foreplay and sensuality and expression and patience. I mean, we are in a culture of a 40-hour work week, and like what you said, like taxes and business, and is just like that is priority, focusing on the discomforts and where we're not hitting the target or the norm or not being a part of the highest curve of the class. You know what I'm saying? How many perfect attendance awards can as a parent can you commit to getting for your, I mean, it's constantly like race to the top. I mean, we even had a whole program called Race to the Top as an educational national program. I mean, everything in America for me has really felt like a race.
Mhm.
And that, if anything, that is going to cause pain if you think that you're not where the norm is, and the whole system is set up in that way to support and serve a certain echelon, a certain group of people, based on race, class, and gender combinations,
Right.
right?
Oh, for sure.
So in that sense, it's like we're not in a system that actually supports the balancing, the unique balance of the feminine and masculine energies in all of us, because that balance is what's going to maintain the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is going to maintain the immunity.
Mhm.
But the more you disconnect people from society and from one another and from nature, you're going to see that there's going to be less active vagus nerve, and we're going to have to find other ways to do that and maintain that. But right now our system is really not set up to quickly transform pain to pleasure. So it's really for those of us who are stepping into the work of an awakening. We're processing a great awakening right now, or we've been in the midst of an awakening for 10 years. Some people are going through awakenings since the moment they're born, and they live these lives until the moment they leave this plane, right? And for others, they have their awakening right before they move and leave this plane. Everybody is uniquely different, so not one kundalini like you can't create a template and say have a kundalini awakening in 30 days and
Right.
fucking sell it like some. I was gonna call out a whole bunch of yoga studios. Probably not a good idea on your YouTube channel. You're gonna fucking sell it like a 30-day yoga certification program. That shit is not real.
It's kind of like how to find your soulmate in 30 days. It doesn't work that way either. Like you can find someone to date in 30 days, but to try to manifest your ultimate soulmate, that's a divine timing sort of thing. That's not something that, you can get yourself ready, but that's not something that you're going to be able to do. So that irks me as well when I see coaches selling that to people, because they're playing on their vulnerabilities, and they're playing
Totally.
their desires. And
It's the desperation, and they're playing on the wounded masculine of fix it quick, get it now, and fix it instead of sit in it and heal it. And that's not just like America. That's just patriarchy in general,
it's
and
patriarchy, and
ancestral wound
that's what
too.
came up for me listening to, I had my a depressive episode when I was 23 years old, and that's 20 years ago now, and it hasn't come back because I learned how to navigate out of it. And I learned a lot in that experience. But what I learned is having to unwind all of that toxic masculine energy, really, because I grew up in the Midwest in a patriarchy. No pain, no gain. I played 3 sports. It was like wrap it up, medicate it, get back out there, put some icy hot on it, win the game. And then also being on a woman's team, you have to compete with the men's team because everybody would go see the boys play, but they weren't as, interested to see
Right.
women play. And so there's always this like, you're not measuring up, you're not good enough. And if you could just be like the boys, then maybe you'd be accepted or maybe you'd be good enough. And
Mhm.
then working your ass off. My mom taught me she's like, you can do anything a man can do, but you're just gonna have to work 3 times as hard to be accepted and to be seen as capable. And I experienced that as well. And it got me success. It got me through degrees. It got me the A's. It got me starting positions on the basketball team. It got me all these things. But by 23, I was in bed. My adrenals completely shot,
Mm.
3 medications, and I'm lucky that it happened to me so young that I could bounce back by changing my lifestyle and changing my ways. And also, this is what I teach too is, and you say it with pleasure and pain, the trauma only sets in when we avoid it, when we put our head down and work,
Mhm.
when we stuff it, when we distract ourselves with something else, when we go fuck somebody else because we're going through a heartbreak, or we go drink it away because we're upset about something, that's what buries the trauma deeper in the tissues. And like you said, if we sit with it and let it pass through and feel it, but we're so afraid to feel. And we live in this culture that doesn't, it has this illusion of being so tough, so strong and so tough that we're actually brittle and easier to break. And it's the quickness that you reach the trauma, the quicker that you get to it after it happens, it doesn't set in. You can move through it. You can quickly move that energy out of your body. And the way that I've found in my work and personally to do that the best, most efficiently is through pleasure. It's the pleasure of that's created with breath. It's the pleasure that's created with hypnosis. It's the pleasure that's created with meditation. It's the pleasure that's created with, all of these semi-altered state experiences that just allows the trauma to lift up and gently release rather than to have to go and dig and do surgery. And nobody really wants to go, you know t- to see a therapist and talk about all their traumas and dig it all back up again. That can be re-traumatizing. But if it's already coming up, it's like, let's talk about it, you
Yeah,
know
and I also think that a lot of times, trauma therapy, yes, talking about your story is good. And, we it's time for us to also be providing people with tools.
right.
But it's like the Western medical society and Western medicine has really limited us as human beings to provide the things to each other that are the foundational building blocks of healing, because it's seen as sexual or it's seen as, I don't know, like I trip out. I don't know if I was talking, to y'all about this or who I was talking to, but it's just interesting. Like we look at people who do energy work as weird or crazy, or like them doing something that could potentially, I don't know, be witchy or something, right? But yet we see surgeons taking a scalpel to a chest, or doing a tracheotomy, you know what I'm saying, or performing brain surgery. I mean, like that to me seems quite mad scientist as well. So I mean, that being said, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, because I do believe that Western medicine has its place and has saved numerous lives, right? It's again about the lack of choice and the lack of exposure to everything that's going on. But right now, the way we are prescribing healing in Western hospitals, I mean, massage therapists can't even give a massage barefoot while they're earthing on the ground. They have to have shoes on. Something small like that. I mean, that's a small detail where it's like everybody knows that shoes that have rubber soles are actually going to, that's like a little extra work that you got to do to get the magnetic pulse from the earth. Like our indigenous brothers and sisters literally wore moccasins and were barefoot on the earth, probably for a reason. It's not that they're savage or they're less than, that there's a healing quality, that they're not like, doing some crazy witchcraft,
Mhm.
perhaps, right? And so that piece is, I think that's a big piece of why, people are very afraid, or they will hide in the trauma body, because a lot of the support that we're providing, for our brothers and sisters on the planet it's almost like how I feel about the prison system. And it's like our prison system literally exists based on the recidivism rate. It's based on the rate of people returning to prison.
Yeah.
So that just tells us, are we healing? Are we healing our brothers and sisters as they leave, these holding cells? Or are we giving them the tools and resources to go out and be and shift, so that they're, quote unquote, able to be law abiding citizens? Are we actually providing them with the tools, or do we actually rely on them going out there and recreating their pattern and recreating their trauma to only return again, so that we can continue to fund this industry that, especially in California, we build more prisons than educational institutions.
Well, and then there's a school to prison pipeline, right? So, I mean, you obviously probably seen the research studies on yoga, and how, yoga in prisons builds the vagus nerve, and they call it the compassion muscle. And prisoners actually go back out in the world and have lower rates of recidivism because of now an increased capacity for compassion. So that is one instance where the tools are helping. And when I used to work for the school district, I worked with juvenile offenders that were in juvenile hall for a crime, some minor, some pretty intense crimes. And I did home-based therapy in the home with their parents mostly, but they were sometimes involved in order to keep them from reoffending. And many times it was, it was a lot of socioeconomic, not socioeconomic factors, but sociological factors, economics being part of it sometimes. That was, the parents being either too lenient or too strict, usually.
Right.
That led to that. And basically what it boils down to is not having, again, tools or a map or role models that can keep you in line, and negatively coping with stress and trauma. There's so much stress and trauma. So you go out and you create more trauma to deal with the nervous system dips from the primary trauma. It's very messy. And
it only impacts and it stacks. Like, the feeling I always get, even when we've done the energy work, is just like, when we have our people on the table, it's like sometimes you can sense that it's like there's stacking, that and a pressing, and it feels impacted. And ironically, in the beginning of sessions, a lot of times the first thing that you hear moves is the stomach, and the stomach starts to gurgle. And that's when like, okay, the energy is moving. We're starting to release. The nervous system is starting to like get, and then you'll hear the stomach is starting to move, and it's willing. And then we'll be able to, okay, boom. And how interesting, the vagus nerve literally rests right there at the colon. So that's a really good sign to see, to make these connections. People are like, oh, that's not real. But it's like, how is that not sign? I mean, but doesn't that make sense to you? Like, you're laying down, your stomach gargles. Like, but for someone to say that that's energy or that's chakra work, it feels so foreign to them. But the truth is that it's energy. Energy literally is just, it's movement. And energy, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, even oxygen has mass. So we know that when we move our hands, we are moving energy. If I have a feather here and I move my hand, that feather is going to move. You can't see it, but you can, right?
Right.
And so these are the things. So if we are, when it's like looking forward to the trigger and trauma, it's almost like when I do like the trigger dance and I'm like, yeah, whoop, there it is. Whoop, there it is. It's like, there's that trigger, whoop, there it is. Whoop. It's like, I have to, that's my way of playing. Because if I can dance in my shadow, I can start to massage the idea. I can start to have some foreplay with the shadow. And instead of it being like, my pattern and trauma of childhood. I am never heard nor seen. I shall annihilate thee. It is more like, hey, where you at? Who you? Who are you? You back again? Oh, you look good. See, different. Little things different. Some of the things are the same. But sit down. Oh, you like music? Me too. Let's play some music. Let's dance with this pain we feeling. Building a different relationship with the emotions, it shifts. And again, if that's hard to understand because that feels like, but my emotions, like, what do you mean? It takes work to start to feel that immersion and be able to understand and classify what I'm feeling. But what's so interesting is, what is the one thing we start in kindergarten? We teach kindergartner students how to name their emotions. Every kindergarten class, you'll see the face and the emotion. I am feeling this because of this. Somehow we have lost the ability to name the emotion we're feeling and see where its, where its root system is connected to. And sometimes that root system is beyond our knowing, and is connected to our family lineage, which is then connected to the human lineage, which is then connected to the wound of being a collective, right? As beautiful as it is to be connected, we have to also understand that that comes, for it to be beautiful, we also have to know ugly, right? To know ugly, that's how we know beautiful. We need this. And again, bringing it to energy, everything has an equal and opposite. Yeah. So if I can, for me, dancing and being playful, I'm literally balancing the code of being told that you don't have a voice, like what you said, all that high school athletic bullshit, man. I mean, even right now, what they're talking about, right, with the women's NBA and the men's NBA, about how to get more ticket sales to support the women's. I mean, the fact that this is even an issue, the fact that like women are still getting paid less, it's like, I can yell about it. However, I want to do things that are gonna bring my awareness to a place of balance. So you can yell about it, rage about it, and you have a responsibility then to like shape and mold it. You know, it's like, if you just go to the garden and you weed and you do all this crazy weeding, you just have a whole bunch of piles of dirt, right? But we take, you have piles of dirt and you have like weed carcasses everywhere. But if we actually are conscious gardeners, we pay attention to what weeds don't serve us. We remove those weeds. We till the soil, right? We till it. We put some nutrients in there, right? We pay attention to the moon, the phases of the moon and the sun, and we see which seeds will grow. Which seeds will actually grow right now, because not all seeds grow at all times.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that metaphor up too, because my last show last week was cultivating the garden.
Oh,
And we talked about that metaphor and relationships and self-care, your own inner garden. And my next show is yoni steaming with
perfect.
so it's like such a bridge. And again, that's the divine timing. And I'm so glad that you brought up that, well, a couple things, the energy and the gurgling of the stomach. I 10 years ago, after my grandma passed away, I was doing some Shen therapy to deal with the grief. I feel like grief is just something it just has its own time, and it's heavy. It's so heavy and layered, like you're saying, and I noticed when I get on the table that as soon as the energy started to move, my stomach was just going wild. And
Wow.
and she would say, yeah, you're digesting the emotions. And so that is always a sign for me that I'm digesting emotions, and my stomach starts gurgling during energy work. And then also once I go into an altered state, like a hypnotic state, I start to salivate, which is also
Oh,
the relaxation response, right? Because it's like your
yeah.
body does that before you're about to eat, and it's preparing to digest. So you do that not only with food, but also with energy. And
And the food is energy.
yeah, and you mentioned the energy coming off of your hands, and I'm still blurry, but we're just gonna have to go with it. Funny how you started blurry and now I'm ending blurry.
Thank,
But
we're balancing each other
we're
out.
balancing each other out as we do. But after we got back from Tulum, I mean, you know, when you do that exercise, you close your eyes, you can feel like, do you feel the thickness? I was like, whoa. Like, I was like, it's out here. Like, I've never felt this before. I'm like, this is cool. And sometimes I'll be like on my phone, just, I don't even press the screen and it hits the button. I'm like, hey, it says really dangerous sometimes if I'm not wanting to send a text message yet. And it just like goes. So energy is real, you know, it's real. And the more we cultivate it, and like you're saying, the energy moving through the spinal column as well. And energy is emotion. And so you brought up the feeling. And I think that is so underrated and so important to just name your emotions, name your feelings. And like you said, we teach it in kindergarten, but do we then maintain it? Because so many people are bad at it. And I want to call out myself and my colleagues, because therapists are some of the worst at naming our emotions, because we're so used to listening to other people's emotions and holding space and analyzing and looking at all the other things and using our brains. And it's really important to be able to also get into our hearts. And so I'm always having to remind myself, okay, that's a thought, that's not an emotion. What's the emotion underneath that? Because it's an easy way to intellectualize and sidestep those emotions, because it's really scary to feel when you don't know if you're going to be able to unfeel or move through the feelings, or save face or whatever. And so how do we feel? We have to have the bravery to feel and know that once we get used to doing it, it's not as bad, it's not so bad. And having those healing spaces in which to do that, these safe spaces, whether it's a dyad or with a healer or in a group or whatever else, it's such a powerful practice. It sounds so simple because we're like, oh, I feel good or I feel bad. But often we just reach for a soothing mechanism. I had no idea how much I would reach to a glass of wine when I had a bad day until I was pregnant. And I was like, oh man, I just got to sit here and feel all this shit. Like, oh, I felt like I had no awareness around that until
Well, and I think that that's probably why, so
Mhm.
many mothers do experience that bliss state, is because they also are taking 9 months and they're really cleaning their system, and they're not engaging in maybe a lot of emotional numbing things that they would have been doing beforehand. So I could see that physical piece. And the other thing is, like, for a lot of folks who are like, they might be listening to this and being like, oh yeah man, like, yeah, I'm totally ready to do that, I'm totally going to start naming my emotions. And it's like, it's not a, like, you don't go from 0 to 10 if 10 is the final. There actually is no end. There is no end. And that's another really, really big piece, is that we are trained, in the patriarchy, to believe that there is an end.
Yeah,
But there is no end. There is no finish line.
linear, right? Point A, point B, linear, when it's actually,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
very
it's like that, that's just not the way it is. And in fact,
Mhm.
let's go to science for that one. If
Yeah.
you were in, if you were in the hospital room and they did your heart rate and you got the linear,
You're done.
it'd be a sign that there's no life.
Mhm.
This up and down, this rhythm that goes up and off, and it's not never same. It's like we gotta search for the rhythmic patterns. Like,
Mhm.
we naturally are this unique expression of magnetic waves,
Yeah.
right? And we each of us pulse at a different way, and each of us respond to one another, and then astrologically we express ourselves differently. So we, like, it's this beautiful, harmony that's existing. So to just understand that is going to make you slow down a little bit more, and know that it's like day by day, little by little. Folks who I know who are really ready to, like, change their life, and they go for those 30-day money back guarantee deals, right? It's like, it's just like weight loss. Like, yeah, you're gonna lose the weight, that shit gonna come back twice as hard, and you're gonna feel hella bad about it, but it'll give you the temporary comfort.
Mhm.
That's the other piece about it, is like, get used to the inhale and the exhale, get used to the labor pains,
Mhm.
and as mothers, again, who give birth, they are forced to go through this for a reason, because motherhood ain't no easy thing. You got to be used to it's like, I feel like, from the moment the egg is fertilized, my girlfriends that I've witnessed, I'm like, damn, they shift. Like you can just see it. It's like, and you're immediately getting used to that. And so for those of us who don't have children, and we are ready to heal our Shakti, and we're ready to bring our Shakti online, we've got to be ready for those birthing pains.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes 9 months for us to arrive on this planet, and then we need we need nurturing and breast milk and human connection. I mean, they say 18, but shit, let's keep it real. Some of us need that shit until our 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we take time.
Yeah.
So you can't rush this process. Every day, a good thing to start doing is like name one emotion a day.
Yeah.
And don't be ashamed to say, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Or I'm pissed. Like someone cuts you off. Fuck you, you fucking fuck. Damn, I'm angry. Shit.
Mhm.
Fuck, I can't believe I just cursed out some person in a car, and like I don't even know them. Like own your emotion. Whatever emotion it may be, just start to own it and like be a witness, almost as if you were your like own lab technician and you were your own species, or you were the adult of your own child and you were watching yourself in action all day, and just see how you react and respond if you don't get food,
Mhm.
if you don't do something that you told yourself you were going to do, like all the little things that cause moments of discomfort. You want to own those emotions
Mhm.
and start to also own the emotions that feel good,
Right.
because we don't
Right.
we don't really value that either.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think a big part, even for women, which Mama Gina teaches this too, is that we have a hard time celebrating the positive things in our life, especially with other women, because of jealousies, because of envy, because of, they talk about the lobsters in the pot. Like one starts to crawl out, then the other lobster is going to pull it back down again. And so women often don't celebrate emotions either. They'll commiserate with each other and stay in the muck together, because then they don't feel like they're rising above their sisters. They're knocking themselves down or whatever else. But can we create these spaces in womanhood where we can celebrate each other and say, and I think you spoke to it also in your class, where you can say, hey, if I feel envy or I feel jealousy, it's because that's coming to me. I'm almost there. It's something I desire, and see it as that, instead of like, oh man, like I'm agreeing with
Less
envy, or
than. I'm
yeah,
less than.
less than, or I'm not good enough or whatever. It's a sad thing, because it's harmful for whichever side you're on, whether
Totally,
you're the one
totally.
celebrating. So how do we celebrate each other too? So I'm so glad that you brought up that celebration piece. So important. And you know I part of the reason I think we've gotten so close during this COVID time is because we both have the work that we do, and the understanding that we have is that we're very concerned about what's happening in the world, because the very things that heal are the very things that are getting harder and harder to access. Hot yoga studios are closed down, gyms are closed down. We can't take as deep of breaths with cloth over our faces. We are being told to isolate and distance. Censorship on different platforms means that we can't express, and there is a part of expressing your emotion, and there's also a very healing part of being witnessed and being held and being seen and heard and validated. And that's the other end of the thing. So I think both of us and our tribe, our community, we've really been brainstorming ways to step into more action and really put ourselves out there. And people that have spiritual businesses, we're not always that gung-ho on the marketing pieces or the money making pieces or the like asking for money or to get paid for our work, but it's really needed right now. And we do have the tools, we've been using them for decades, and now it's time to put them out there so that people know how to heal, and especially in a time when it's not as easily accessible. So we're getting creative. We're creatives too. We're getting creative with the work that we offer. So I was hoping you could say a little bit about, I know there's lots of things that you and Shofar are offering. Obviously, your movement medicine in the park is amazing. It's completely legal with the space and the outdoor, activity, and it's a religious gathering, which is totally legal in California. I mean, love is my religion, so it's
Yeah.
a space of love. And then
On Sunday, it's the cathedral of the cathedral of the trees.
Yeah, and it's healing, like you talked about the earthing, the movement, the expression, the sunshine, the nature, the animals, like all of this, but it's not going to be for everybody, it's not
Right.
going to be for everybody. So I know that you're very exclusive with who you invite in or who you allow into that space. So I'm mentioning it here in case there's somebody that resonates with everything that we're saying. And if you're one of these goddesses that, this might be something you're interested in. But I know, you and Shofar also do the energy work. I'm wanting to experience that. I'm hoping to do a
Right.
session with both of you in the near
Oh, that'd be
future.
great.
Not because I have anything major to work on at this point in my life. I'm in a really good place, but I also am like, there's always something to uncover. There's always something to, enhance and get better
Well,
with.
that's a really beautiful point too that you make. It's like a lot of times we think also of healing when we're in the dumps and in the shit
Mhm.
part. But the truth is that healing is a daily practice. If you start to realize that, healing is doesn't mean that you're sick. Healing is the ever evolving expansion.
Mhm.
It's the shift and change. It's the tree, it's the seed emerging out of the soil.
Right.
It's growth. Healing just is growth. And so a lot of times, that's why as medical intuitives and such, they won't we a diagnosis is like a curse in those senses, right? Because really it's just like, what am I healing? What am I growing? What am I evolving? And
Right.
so, you don't, if you just wait to go get help once you've already felt sick, it's going to be much harder than if you maintain a daily practice of healing, because then you actually build your emotional immunity as well. So that's the other thing, is like, don't wait. Don't wait. And especially now with, hospitals overpopulated, and with all of the fear around getting your healing at a Western hospital, this is a great opportunity to explore
Mhm.
alternative forms of healing that have just as much proof, if not more, scientific evidence of being effective in, you're not allowed to say curing disease,
Mhm.
technically. However, you are seeing symptoms decrease ridiculously.
Yeah.
And there are so many miracle healings that are tracked. Books have been written, but again, do we have access to them? Does the person who's being forced to go on to chemo and radiation therapy, were they talked to about all of their options? Right. And it's a symptom of the system that we live in. And I think that that's the big piece, is that we have to ultimately understand that the system we live in is a direct reflection of the system within.
Well, and
And
let's be honest too that we are I mean, we can't say something cures disease or whatnot. We're dancing around the pharmaceutical industry, who has the money and power in the medical system, the sick care system, and medications are needed sometimes. And like you
yeah,
said, we get lodged, whether it's trauma or physical issues or just a bunch of things, structural things that happen. Sometimes we need medication. There's no shame in that, and that's
no.
absolutely valid. But to go to a pill every time we have a little discomfort, and like you're saying, we have the tools to move through these things immediately. And again, look at Tulum. I remember saying before we went, like, we had some healing ceremonies and things scheduled that we were going to do. And I'm thinking, I'm good. Like, I'm in a good place. Like, I'm in the best place I've ever been in my life. Like, I think I'm finally like at this nice, comfortable plateau. And I was the first one in tears down there. so, it's interesting to see what comes up. And then doing the Temazcal ceremony, which is, for anybody that's watching, it's a Native American sweat lodge, the Mexican Mayan version of that. um, you set an intention to heal. So there's spiritual things, there's actual sweat and herbs, and there's so many different healing elements. I was trying to heal a mold issue, and you can hear a little bit of a cough and congestion I'm having even right now because of the mold that was in my home with a bathroom leak. A couple times it leaked, but I had spots on my torso that just were persistent and would not go away. And so when I went into that Temazcal, I'm like, I just want to heal. It didn't itch. There's nothing wrong with it, except that I knew something wasn't right because there's spots on my skin. And I set the intention to heal. And immediately within a couple days, they were gone from the front side of my torso. So by the time we got back to the States, they were gone. Now they're almost totally gone on the back side of my torso. So even
Wow.
doing something like that, where so many people would have just been like, yeah, I got spots on my skin and lived like that for 20 years without thinking to do anything, or maybe grabbed a cream to put on it that also, congested their liver or filled up their liver. Now their immune system's lower. They don't see the ripple effect that these things have, rather than thinking like steam out the mycotoxins. A very natural but even more powerful thing to do. And so yeah, it's time to dive into these healing modalities. And you make a great point about traditional systems kind of being inaccessible too, and closed down. And it's time to explore. And we're in this age of Aquarius energy now. Things are happening really quickly, and alternative ways of doing things are happening. So
Well, I
this is
mean, an
cool.
example is just like, this last week we did that group past life transgression, and
Regression, not transgression. I don't
regression.
know about your past life, but I was not transgressing in mine. I think a couple people did have a past life transgression.
I was like, well, I don't know. Actually, no, let's talk. We could probably break that down and have a good time. So
We
yeah,
can
my
do that
regression.
too.
Well, I had definitely, I've been dealing with some, back and hip stuff. Like I told you, I'm getting some nice revisitation of things that want to really get moved through and heal through some of those spinal injuries that I had in my late teens, early 20s.
Mhm.
And I was in a lot of pain that day. And after our hypnosis session, like I started to feel bubbling on my right side, like where my ribs are, and it felt like a babbling brook, like it was like bubbling, 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 and it was like it almost felt like my flesh was like a brook was water was going there.
Mhm.
But what's interesting was the pain is on the left.
Mm.
So trip out, girl. I came home and I went back to look at my scans because I was like, what? That's so strange. Like, and it's interesting. The injury is it's on it's so wild. It's on my right side, but all the nerve damage is on the left.
Wow.
So I think, and then, I shared with you a little bit about what my visions were.
Mhm.
And clearly the left, right? And then after our hypnosis, it was like, I did not feel any pain for a good 2 days. Like,
Wow.
yeah, and that was such a relief. So I was like, okay, this means that this, and so this is the other pieces. It's like that resonated with me. So now I know, like, oh, hypnosis is going to be a really good tool for me because different things resonate with different people. Like for me, biofield tuning immediately, like I was like, whoa, I really feel this.
Mhm.
I did Reiki sessions for a while. Not always did I get that experience. Yoga,
Mhm.
didn't always feel it. Like different therapies didn't always resonate. And that's the other thing to know is like just there's always variety
Yeah.
too. So like it's just like you're gonna like different things are gonna resonate at different times. So you've got to just remain open.
Yep.
That would probably be the first step here if you want to like I
Mhm.
feel like almost to and I guess this could bring in like some of the other projects and tools too, but really ultimately every single practice is to um, ease the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
Because that literally is it is the nerve of the body that goes through everything and touches everything.
Mhm.
And even in the spiritual realm, the kundalini has the same thing. This torso area of ours is like our battery pack. If you think about it, like everything we need is right here. The legs just hang out and then the arms just hang out. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're just like there, but it's like that's the battery pack.
Mhm.
Bam, right there. So kundalini, what we're doing is just like we have, I mean, trip out, the vagus nerve has two parts that come into one.
Mhm.
Kundalini is oftentimes symbolized with the two serpents.
Yeah, the snakes.
And
Yeah.
then when they become the one and when they find their vibration, because we talked about that in dance class. The snakes move based on vibration. I mean, Lord, like it's all there, if we're willing to see. And
Yeah.
so every practice is about that. So whatever people, okay, well, how can I, okay, I'm ready to activate my vagus nerve. Well, they
Mhm.
do have vagus nerve electrotherapy, where like you can get things put in, right? And they can do that. But anything that actually creates connection,
Mhm. Mhm.
anything that inspires more breath and more flow, like you talked about the belly. So things, breathing that breathing that focuses on the belly. So breath of fire. Oh my gosh, Wim Hof therapy is awesome for the vagus nerve, because when you do go into the cold water and immerse yourself, and when you focus on heating the body, it's this whole pleasure pain thing that we were talking about. You're actually able to surpass a pain point to where you can actually feel the breakthrough, right? um, and so the Wim Hof therapies are great ways to also like get into the vagus nerve work. And if you're in San Diego, you guys should definitely check out Golden Awakening, who does polar plunges, and she's all about the Wim Hof and the conscious breath work piece, who is a cancer warrior survivor, and she's a practitioner now that is showing other people how to do that. So these are great basic ways that don't require you to go to a healer right away. You know what I'm saying? Like you could even Google and YouTube vagus nerve breathing if you're really ready to start this, and start slow and little by little. Right. Communication is huge, and just activating the voice and speaking your truth. That is great. Now, if that still feels like because of trauma, or because it doesn't feel safe to share your voice yet, or you're not ready, you don't feel ready to step into that place, start with humming. Humming your emotion is huge.
Mhm.
And I also would say humming in the bedroom is a great way to start. If you are a very silent love maker, or a silent pleasure person, when you're even giving yourself personal pleasure, start to hum. Just start with a little humming. And you can, as you give yourself pleasure, or as you're making love, if other visions come in that are more emotionally charged, in terms of, like, let's say some anger wants to come through as you're making love, because you start to realize, like, why the fuck haven't I had this in so long? Like, I am deserving of this. And you start to realize, like, all the ways that you've been fucked over. And it's weird, but you're having a good time making love, but your subconscious goes into these places that you have just stored away conveniently to move ahead in this fast working society that we call land of the free, home of the brave, right? They're there, they're all right there. And sometimes when we make love and we start to release, they want to come out and play.
Mhm.
Hum the emotion. Like
Mhm.
if you're if you're not with the lover, or you're nervous about what will come through for you, a lot of people are nervous in this work.
Mhm.
We're not used to that guttural work and the guttural sounds. You're like, oh my God, where's that coming from? Or you feel shame about it. It's like
Mhm.
when a woman farts, it's like she's supposed to feel bad about it.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's like, no, this is just your body doing its thing. So
Mhm.
start to just get comfortable with sound by humming. You can hum feeling in love. You can hum anger. So like if an anger emotion starts to come and you're with your partner, you can kind of warm them, like, and like a beautiful love making partnership, your lover's going to hear that, and it's going to speak to their cellular being, and they're immediately going to be able to do the equal and opposite healing energetic pull. Now this is where we get into a little bit more tantric lovemaking, but they can help transmute that for you. And
Mhm.
then soon you'll be able to actually let out sound and rage
Mhm.
as you're making love within orgasm. And it's a really nice way to, like I always tell you, anytime you add your body into work, in the work you're doing, you're just adding momentum to the energy. So humming is really underrated. We need to continuously hum. So hum as much as possible. Hum your favorite song. Hum an angry conversation with somebody, like, and you just get that air pressure into the physical anatomy of your being. Because when you hum, you actually add pressure to the back of the throat, which in yoga, pranayam, yoga breath work, we call that the ujjayi breath. When we close the back of the throat, and what that really actually does is it presses nicely and massages against those areas that are going to add the vibration to the vagus nerve. And remember, we talked about kundalini, Arohanam. That arohanam is your vagus nerve. It's the scales, it's the vibration, it's the sound, as if your spine was the neck of a guitar or a violin or an upright bass, or even a sitar, right? Like our bodies are meant to be played, and they're meant to find the unique harmony in expression. And when we can have love making experiences where our partners can tune in to what we're doing and what we're feeling and play with that, we can start to really see some momentum in work as well. But I have noticed that in the table work that Show and I do, really, I mean, we don't touch, we're fully clothed, we don't touch private parts, we only touch traditional Chinese medicine pressure points. And it's really a play of projecting and receiving energy into getting into expanded sensual response states.
Mhm.
um, and what I will say is that it's literally just holding safe space to make sound and express. And the more our practitioner is willing to go there, the more their rememberings become powerful and strong, and they literally can start to shift stories, and cells start to work together, and organs, and you start to create this beautiful orchestra of harmony inside of the body that is a born birthright.
Mhm.
So the work we do, that's really what it's about. It's about taking us back to our sovereign birthright as human beings to experience pleasure the way we choose to
Before it gets shut
experience
down,
pleasure.
before those areas get cold and hard and shut down. Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I would say, just, for people starting out, I think the humming is amazing. And even in people starting out who are already making love, they have a partner. I would encourage the ladies to be more vocal, even if it's not making noise, but speaking, like, I like this, or I don't like this, or can you do
Yes.
this instead? Because so many times I think the male ego is triggered when a woman speaks up and during, lovemaking. And so for the men, I would say, let your goddess speak, listen, and know that she's directing you, and not that there's anything that you're doing wrong. It's just a constant communication, as you said, that, getting into the tantric, it's like, oh, you're here, okay, then we're here, and doing that dance, and it's going to be different every time. And I think it's just a good way to start to break out of that, and not get stuck again in that cold hard trauma response in those
Yeah,
interactions.
I mean, we also expect, we so often expect each other to know how to please each other sexually, like it's supposed to be a given, without realizing that most of our culture is framed by pornography and
Right,
Hollywood,
right.
right? And so we have a very misconstrued notion of pleasure,
Mhm.
and a very warped notion of what pleasure even looks like, and what sexy really is and means. And and what I'm noticing too is the dynamic between lovers, that when the lovers actually owning their own miraculousness, a lot of times we will say that, oh, I had the best, oh my god, I had the best sex, like, oh, I just felt so great, and it was just mind blowing, like I can't wait to see that person again. But the truth is that feeling was your feeling.
Mhm.
It was in you. That lover has an interesting energetic that inspired the feeling that was already within you,
Yep.
right? And so that expression of voice that you're talking about, it's almost like we assume, and that's why a lot, again, it's the women playing small, like, oh, I don't want to, well, yeah, like I'll take his number, I don't want to hurt his feelings, I just
Mm.
answer the call. But like, that's avoidance. Like, speak your truth, like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
really flattered, and I'm not really interested right now, but thank you, like,
Yeah.
and help. And if we as
Thank-
we can be like collaborators, and like learn how to speak to each other kindly and compassionately. It's almost like me as a chef, if I get together with somebody who's not a cook, and they really want to prepare a dinner for me, and they want me to have so much pleasure in this dinner because I'm always cooking dinner for them. However, they don't really know how to cook. And if I just like throw the ingredients on the stove, and I expect them to make a 5-course meal like someone like me who's been a chef in a restaurant, It's not going to happen. I'm probably going to be left a little undersatisfied. Salud.
Thank you.
I'm probably going to be left a little undersatisfied with my meal because I gave no direction
Mm-hmm.
when that's my skill.
Mm-hmm.
And women, we are very skilled at knowing what feels good once we tap into our body. So the first step is always get to know your own body and what feels good, and so that you can really express from a place of knowing,
Mm-hmm.
not a place of what you saw looks like it looked good from a porn or a music video. That's all acting. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. And it's different person to person, and it changes, especially
Totally.
for women throughout the life cycle. Our desires shift. We're very
Right.
changeable beings. So it's, just know if you're a person who's having sex with a woman, be able to keep up with that changeability that's going to happen. The fickleness sometimes, it seems fickle, but it's just the feminine, right? The fickle feminine.
Oh,
Um,
I wanted to say one thing on this
mhm.
too. This has been my personal experience. I don't know if there's lots of research around it, so we can like take that as it comes. But this whole idea of the pain thing, they found that actually vaginal stimulation um, helped block certain pain.
Wow.
So this is another interesting thing of releasing trauma, is that vaginal stimulation. And I think that this is where we see some of those orgasmic meditation techniques, or where, they call it oming, where, or the, like where somebody's stimulating you. And, I think that there's these concepts that are there, but with appropriate vaginal stimulation, a lot of times it helps the pain. And I think that that also kind of connects to what you were talking about with labor pain. And then also, like for men, what I've noticed, right? Because we're talking lots about vaginas and vocal cords and the vagus nerve, but what I've noticed too is like men who practice semen retention,
Mhm,
they're able to have rolling orgasms.
mhm,
And I think it has to do with, because what I notice is I can have an orgasm and my mind, my nerve stimulation, the more work I do around that, it's there again, so that if somebody touches me, it's like I can go right back in, and I can create these rolls and waves,
right,
because I'm the stimulation, I want to sustain it and make it last in my body, so that if someone even touches my elbow, it could feel like my clitoris or my nipple is being touched. Like
right.
cells, all of a sudden I'm just like a big sensitive thing, cell that just anywhere you touch is going to feel orgasmic. And I've
No
noticed that,
more
like
enjoyable than a crotch sneeze, than just a little, like, quick little rhythmic thing. It's when your whole body is
totally.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the semen retention thing, for if there's any men listening, like I think there's something there with the semen retention to experience more of this vagus nerve connection, because when, for a woman, the orgasm is so internal, right? It's like everything is inside of us.
Mhm,
And literally, like, and it's interesting, tightening the colon is a very good shortcut to engage the perineum too, which connects to the vagus nerve. So we're all internal, and if anything is being inserted in us, we can feel all these pressures, and there's all these passageways. They say the multiple passageways for orgasm for a woman. And for a man, if we're talking about a man with a penis, it's like there's one channel. But what I've noticed is that with the semen retention practice, because men are practicing understanding the connection of the heart and rewriting story around needing that receipt of ejaculation to feel like you are a man, and you're like consciously rewiring that as you're working with breath and the body and stimulation, they're doing what we do. It's like that's very internal. And so when that semen comes back, just like for us, it can, when we can pull in our orgasm internally, which is another Taoist tantric practice, but really engaging the perineum and the yoni space and pulling it inward to heal the feminine truthfully. Even for the masculine, it's almost like the semen retention is healing their own feminine.
mhm.
They have access to the rolling orgasm, and that is going to help heal the vagus nerve, and it helps become more emotional, because the feminine energy is being nurtured, the creative energy, the seed is being honored. And it's not just getting sometimes thrown out into the garbage when it could be like placed into our body temples or placed into the soil of Mother Earth.
Right.
I mean, there's billions. It could populate the planet probably.
Right.
I'm sure. It's like one batch of semen, right?
We haven't even talked about the endorphins and the immunity boosting and all of those things too that are happening in those, and the testosterone. You get to hang on to your testosterone, you know?
Yeah. So again, at the end of the day, this comes down to the energetics of the masculine and feminine in all of us. It's really not a gender-based thing. It's really not like men don't know this and women don't know this. It's like at the end of the day, do we know ourselves? Because that's ultimately, I keep seeing that in the semen. I'm blown away by semen retention, and you know, I strongly encourage it. I mean, it's pretty awesome. You know, that's what's so wonderful about being with a woman, is that you don't have to worry about, you know, one and done and let me wait until we can go. It's like when a man can do the semen retention and starts to really hone in on that. I tell people, I was like, dang, I feel like I'm in an amazing lesbian relationship with a man. And it's pretty fucking awesome. And I highly recommend it to anybody who is thinking about it. And I highly recommend the use of the yoni egg to heal the womb. So I think that's amazing for the next show, because I think that that's what the woman can do on her end too, in order to deepen the orgasm and engage the vagus nerve. We've got to be willing to de-armor. And you know, I'm sure that it's going to be a really powerful show. But the yoni egg is a very beautiful process and way to not only tighten the pelvic floor muscles, because that's also going to help engage your vagus nerve, but it's also going to just the magic of the stone and how you can move it around and how it travels naturally where it needs to go is, it's quite magical. So yeah, I think that those are some good practices.
Yeah. Well, we're doing yoni steaming next week.
Yoni steaming,
But
not
I'm sure yoni eggs will come into the conversation too.
and I was going to say that, you know, they're both really powerful in similar ways.
Yeah, I've never done yoni steaming, so I'm
Oh wow, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I wanted to just, the comments too that were from a while ago, but I wanted to share them with you because you can't see the screen right now, probably. Space We Create said, yes, 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 resonating with this deeply. Jen saying 100%. Steffi says, Kirti's New York accent just came out. I love that. Steffi says, let's steam my yoni. So people are excited about this topic, I guess. And we've been on here long enough, so I guess it's a good time to wrap it up. Lots of deep truths and valuable gems as usual. And everything you spoke to is, you know, what I create in my group. So I want to say to anybody who is coming, who's interested in finding a format to do this this healing and looking at the community building, the communication, the expressing your truth, the buffet of alternative techniques. We do a new technique each week, so you get
lovely. I love
what
it.
works for you, and not, you know, not everybody's going to work. And what's unique about this round, I did 2 rounds in March, 2 groups in March, but what's unique about this one is I'm offering a 1-year bonus monthly membership so that people can continue to have the supportive structure to keep it going. Because I notice you can teach the skills, but unless you have that community in place, you can slowly slide back. So keep that going.
Yeah, I love that.
Saying yoni steam is incredible, and and she's saying give thanks, goddesses. Thank you for hanging through the whole thing, Nikita. Nikita's at the top. Oh, and Steffi there too. Thank you. And you can reach Kirti's not on Instagram anymore. She has left the building. So you are going to have to find her on her website where she has her offerings. Some she does alone, some she does with her partner Shafar. So go check them out. Julia Shapiro saying thank you to your Julia. And yeah, I'm still on Instagram. I have an Instagram shell, although I was pretty active posting a lot of things today, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to stay there. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned on YouTube and my newsletter, natashaedwina.com. Subscribe to that. and my website. And we're gonna, Kirti and I have been talking about creative things that we can continue to do together to help people and to keep this work going. So definitely keep coming back, and she'll be here every other week now. So very excited about that. Thank you, Kirti. As usual, thank you everyone for joining, and come back next week for Yoni steaming with
Yeah.
Shamika.
Peace
All
and love,
right.
y'all.
Bye.